By 2023, the number of international migrants worldwide had exceeded 300 million, accounting for 3.6% of the global population. At least 2 million people have moved from the global south to the global north, where nearly half of the planet's wealth is concentrated, although less than 1/6 of the population lives there, with an average GDP per capita 4 times higher than in the south. 733 million people suffer from hunger or food insecurity, while ongoing conflicts have reached the highest number since 1946, contributing to the massive growth in forced migration. With a yearly increase of nearly 9 million by the end of 2023, the number of forcibly displaced people has risen to 117 million, 6 times more than in 2000, 2/5 of them consisting of minors. 38.5 million are refugees and asylum seekers, and more than 68 million are internally displaced, while the approximately 8 million climate-displaced people are counted separately. Amidst these heavy migration flows, many EU member states, Italy included, respond by intensifying border externalization and enforcing pushbacks, forcing migrants to embark on more dangerous routes and exposing them to the risk of violence, torture, and forced detention in camps with inhumane conditions. In 2023, Libya and Tunisia stopped more than 93,000 people from continuing their journey, while the number of confirmed casualties and missing persons exceeded 2,500 in the central Mediterranean route alone. In the same year, irregular crossings of the EU borders rose to more than 385,000, more than 2 out of 3 across the central Mediterranean and Western Balkan routes. As a result, the number of asylum applications filed within the European Union also grew to 1,130,000 in 2023, including subsequent applications, a quarter of which involved minors. Germany, France, Spain and Italy received more than 70% of them. Based on the positive outcomes of both first-instance applications and appeal procedures, the EU member states granted protection to 410,000 asylum seekers in 2023. With almost 158,000 arrivals by sea, 50% more than in 2022, and 12,000 reported entries through the Balkan route, the number of new asylum applications filed in Italy increased from 77,200 in 2022 to almost 131,000 in 2023, despite current restrictions and lingering delays in formalizing them. Of the nearly 46,000 first-instance applications evaluated in 2023, 47.5% received a positive response. Regarding courtroom asylum adjudication, the recognition rate increases to 76.4% out of 15,000 appeals. The vast majority of migrants who entered the Italian reception system are still housed within the CAS facilities, the so-called extraordinary centers, managed by private entities where asylum seekers have once again been relegated, and services have been reduced. At the end of 2023, out of more than 139,000 migrants who arrived in Italy, only 25% were placed within the SAI system, the ordinary reception facilities run by local authorities. Serious concerns arise from the possibility for unaccompanied foreign minors who are over 16 years old to be accommodated within extraordinary centers for adults, increasing their risk of experiencing promiscuity, overcrowding, and reduced safeguards. More than 41.4 million foreigners reside in the European Union, of whom about 14 million are EU citizens. By also considering the foreign-born and naturalized ones, the total number of residents with a migration background equals 60 million. Italy remains the 4th largest country in terms of foreign residents after Germany, France and Spain, with 5.3 million third-country nationals, which corresponds to roughly 9% of its total population. Most are Europeans, mainly from the EU, while about 1/5 are Asian, another 1/5 come from Africa, and slightly over 7% come from the American continent. With 1.1 million residents, Romanians remain the most numerous national group, followed by Albanians, Moroccans, Chinese and Ukrainians. The convoluted mechanisms behind the possibility of entering Italy lawfully, alongside the increase in the Italian citizenship acquisitions and the reduced influx of displaced Ukrainians, have led to a decrease in the number of non-EU citizens who legally reside in Italy, down to 3.6 million as of the end of 2023. 3 out of 5 hold a long-term residence permit, while those granted a residence permit for family reasons account for more than a third of the residents with a fixed-term permit. This category continues to outnumber those who hold a work permit, as well as the beneficiaries of international and complementary protection statuses, 2/5 of whom have been granted temporary protection as displaced people from Ukraine. Despite a general rise in the employment rate, the number of regular foreign workers remains stable at 2,400,000 in 2023, equating to 10% of all employed persons. At the same time, the number of unemployed foreigners decreased to 304,000, despite still accounting for approximately 16% of the total. Access to work for foreign women is still particularly hindered, corresponding to 41.9% of the employed, but 52.6% of the unemployed. The lack of growth in the regular employment rate among foreigners is weighed down by unrealistic regulations for the inclusion of an additional workforce from abroad. For this reason, in 2023, less than a quarter of all the foreigners authorized to enter Italy under the quotas set by the Decreto Flussi have been summoned to sign the employment contract and receive the related work permit. Moreover, foreign workers remain confined to specific sectors, primarily involving manual jobs that are often poorly paid and more exposed to possible accidents. 6 out of 10 have blue-collar or low-skilled jobs, which is twice the rate of Italians, while fewer than 9 out of 100 hold skilled professions compared to 38.6% of Italians. Their incidence among the employed exceeds the average in transport and warehousing, hotels and restaurants, construction, agriculture, and especially in family services, where it reaches 62.5%. Domestic work alone accounts for about 1/3 of the foreign female workforce, while industry and construction employ 44% of the male workforce. Moreover, more than 1/3 of foreign workers are overqualified compared to 1/4 of the Italians, and 16% work involuntarily part-time compared to nearly half of the Italians. Job segregation and subordination, along with low occupational mobility, also generate significant income inequalities. In 2023, the average annual income of foreigners was approximately 1/3 lower than that of Italians. Against this scenario, it does not come as a surprise that 40% of foreigners, twice as many as Italians, are at risk of poverty and social exclusion, and that 35% of foreign-only households live in absolute poverty, a figure nearly 6 times higher than that of Italian-only households. However, as of May 2024, only 3% of foreigners were receiving the inclusion allowance. The growing and more widespread indigence is also reflected in access to housing. Almost 2/3 of immigrants live in rented accommodation, often illegally and at inflated prices. 1/5 own their homes. The rest are almost equally divided between those who live at their workplaces, such as many caregivers, and those who reside with friends and compatriots, often in overcrowded conditions. Additionally, the 2021 census counted 36,000 homeless individuals and at least 10,000 agricultural workers living in the 150 ghettos surveyed in Italy, alongside those in reception facilities or detained in often unlivable conditions in repatriation centers. The cumbersome procedure for accessing Italian citizenship also hinders foreigners' full participation in the country's social and economic life, especially for the younger generations. The periodic peaks in annual acquisitions, such as the 214,000 recorded in 2022 and 2023, are primarily linked to the passage of time, with large groups of immigrants reaching the 10-year residence threshold required for naturalization, often as a result of previous mass regularizations. Among the nearly 915,000 foreign pupils enrolled in the Italian schooling system, representing 11% of the total student population, those born in Italy make up almost 2/3 of the total. Despite their steady growth, it is concerning that their presence progressively decreases as the level of education rises. They account for 13.3% of those enrolled in primary school, but only 8.4% of secondary school students, where 2 out of 3 choose technical or vocational institutes, compared to 46% of Italians. In higher education, only 38.5% of foreign students opt to pursue a university degree, compared to a national average of 52%. In a context where, despite severe conflict escalation and a troubling rise in xenophobic sentiments, the population of foreign origin integrates into and enriches the social, cultural and economic fabric of our country, with its unique contributions, it is more and more urgent to promote policies of recognition and empowerment aimed at developing an open and cohesive society. With this goal in mind, the Dossier Statistico Immigrazione serves as an invaluable source of knowledge for all who wish to engage in this mission.